working with basically a conceptual plan that shows that a combined building at the site that's shown there on the vision is large enough to hold a building that we believe would provide the level of services, library services and senior center services that we work with the two directors to identify.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Andrews? Mr. Andrews,
Okay, sorry. He's trying to convince me not to move the question.
either make a motion or step aside.
All right, I'll make a motion that we move the question.
Okay. Second. So, you know what that means? If you've heard enough discussion, you want to then vote on it. So, the vote is to stop the discussion. If you want to stop, you vote yes. If you want to keep talking about it, you vote no. There has been good discussion on this. I'll say that right now, whether you're in favor or against it. It's been good discussion. I'm pleased with that. So, all those in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried by 2/3 majority. So, we will now vote on the motion derived from Article 3 to say that this is the vision. That's what we are voting on. If you're in favor of that, you'll vote yes. If you're not in favor of it, you will vote no. It only requires a majority vote, correct? Okay, thank you very much. So all those in favor of the vision as indicated by the photo there, signify by saying aye. Aye. No? No. The motion carried by majority. Article 34.
I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sell, lease, or otherwise convey such land or building located at 3 Milford Street, as shown on Assessor's Map 201-055, and such land located at 2 Grove Street, as shown on Assessor's Map 201-057, and is on file with the town clerk, for such sum and upon such conditions as may be determined by the Board of Selectmen, with such sale, lease, or conveyance to occur following the town selection of a developer in accordance with the provisions of GLC 30B, including issuance of a request for proposal, RFP. Provided further that prior to issuing the RFP for the sale, lease, or conveyance of such land or building, the Board of Selectmen shall determine, following a properly posted open meeting for which the matter of the RFP appears on the Board's meeting notice, that said RFP is consistent with the vision for a revitalized Upton Center, developed and prepared by the Upton Center Revitalization Work Group, and approved under Article 33 of the 2019 Annual Town Meeting, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to execute any and all instruments, including deeds, leases, or other agreements, and take all other actions necessary or appropriate to effectuate the vote taken hereof.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. FinCom recommendation.
Favorable action, Mr. Moderator.
Gene, you need the motion, please. So, question for town council. Some of the extra language in here, this is just basically state things that we have to put in there to make that all work or not? Because there's a little bit of language that's a little bit different than what's in the article.
Mr. Moderator, in my opinion, this language is consistent. I actually have already seen it. It just essentially explained that there's going to be a process, and that it seems to me that the most important part of this is the part that says the board has to vote at a meeting where the matter of the RFP is on the board's agenda to confirm, make a determination that the RFP is consistent with the vision that was just approved under the previous article.
Okay, thank you. So it does fit within the four corners of the article. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Sir?
Yeah, Craig Weinfuss, 80 Hazeltine Road. Many members of our community, including the working group, have expressed a strong interest in preserving the church and preventing its demolition. In fact, we have incorporated specific wording into the vision statement for preservation of the church. Article 34 gives the purchaser of the church the ability to demolish the building, so I would like to propose an amendment to this article for a preservation restriction for the Holy Angels Church, which would require the exterior of the building to be preserved as it stands now in accordance with what is recorded in the National Register. However, the interior of the building can be modified by the person who purchases the building. Preserving the Holy Angels Church will secure the historic New England feeling of our downtown area, which is an important tenet of our vision statement. And in the Dodson report that was submitted today, I think page 102, they specifically addressed the adding a preservation restriction to the RFP. So that further supports this amendment. So do you want me to read the amendment, or do you want?
Well, yeah, you have to read it, we have to have a second, I need to look at it, I need to determine whether it fits within the four corners of the article. I would probably ask the opinion of town council, some legal questions with regard to that. So, yes, please read the amendment.
I'll go ahead and read the amendment. Approval of this article is subject to a preservation restriction agreement meeting the requirements of the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 184, Sections 31 through 33, that is written to protect the historic exterior of this building in a manner conforming to the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. This preservation restriction agreement will be administered by the town or by a qualified organization, will be included in the request for proposal and in any purchase and sale agreement, and will be recorded at the Registry of Deeds prior to or at closing.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Let me read this again. So it's the bottom, correct?
It's the last part with amendment.
It says amendment. So, I'm reading this again because it's an important thing to be thinking about with regard to how we go about doing this. So the amendment is approval of this article, actually motion, is subject to a preservation restriction agreement meeting the requirements of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 184, Section 31 through 33, that is written to protect the historic exterior of this building in a manner conforming to the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. This preservation restriction agreement will be administered by the town or by a qualified organization, will be included in the request for proposal, RFP, and in any purchase and sale agreement, and will be recorded at the Registry of Deeds prior to or at closing. So the question I have to determine now is whether or not this fits within the four corners of the article. So, town council, if I could have your opinion.
Can I read that?
Yeah, because I do want you to take a look at it. This might take a couple of minutes. Please be patient. This is an important thing we have to consider. Oh, there we go, thank you. Okay, so I talked to town council with regard to whether or not this amendment fits within the four corners of the article. Okay, so let me just make a few statements, and there's going to be some oohs and ahs, then I'll say there's something else that we could do maybe. So here's the issue. The way this amendment is written, it would absolutely 100% restrict taking down the church. The issue here is that in the previous article, the vision is to, if at all possible, keep the church. Okay? Article 34, in its wording right now, does not in any way say that if the church has been sold, that a builder can do something to the church like take it down. So therefore, the problem with the amendment, it adds a restriction that is beyond the scope of the article to say that it is impossible to tear the church down. If this amendment were to say something like preference to not tear it down, at almost all costs not tear it down, then that would be acceptable. The problem is, I cannot allow this as an amendment because it does go beyond the scope of the article, which says nothing about the possibility that someone could take it down. So therefore, I've got to rule the amendment as written out of order because of that, because it goes too far, basically.
Can it be modified? Can we modify the language?
Well, that's a good question, and Madam Town Council, if you could help us with maybe the modification of the language? Let me give it to you again to word it that way.
Mr. Moderator, perhaps the amendment could say, provided, however, that town meeting expresses a preference that the church exterior be preserved if possible.
Right. So something along those lines, which fits completely in line with what Article 33 says to do. That's the preference. Okay, but I guess until you get into the nuts and bolts about what may or may not cost something, that would be too much of a thing to ask for. So that's the situation.
Could I make a motion to pass over this article?
When you say pass over, no, okay. Are you talking about passing over your amendment or passing over the whole,
The article itself?
the whole 34 itself? Well, at the moment, well, let's see, let me say this. Since I'm going to rule this out of order, we're going back to the motion itself. The only way that we can dispose of it now is to table it. So we're past the point of passing over, okay, because we already have a motion on the floor. There's been a lot of discussion about it. So if your motion is to table the motion from Article 34, you can make that motion. It requires a second. It requires a 2/3 majority vote because there's no discussion by tabling something. So that's the balance you have to think about. Tabling it means 2/3 of these people would have to say, you know what? We don't want to move ahead with this motion from Article 34. 2/3 of the people have to say that for it to be tabled. If not, then we go back to discussing it as is, and then we'll vote on it. Okay? So so the ball's in your court now.
So yeah, maybe we could just modify the language.
You know, it sounds like modifying the language probably gets you to a better place, maybe. I mean, I'm not suggesting what to do. Okay? So if you want a minute to discuss it with a few people, we can give you that. This is an important
That'd be
issue.
all right.
So
Okay.
if you take a minute to discuss it with some people if you need to. Well, while they're discussing, if you want to make a few comments, that's fine, but we will get back to that next. Mr. Burnett?
The reason we came up with the specific language that we did with regard to the church is that, as was stated, our preference, 100%, is to keep the church. Our concern as a committee as was pointed out to us, to our consultant, is are you willing to throw away the vision and everything that you've worked on to save the church at all costs? And so the language is specifically written the way it is to completely reflect that interest. You know, there's no question we want to keep the church. Our concern is that it makes the project that it reduces the possibility that the project could be a success, where we actually do get a redeveloped town center. So the consensus was that the strongest language that we could come up with was strong preference. The way that we would manage this issue, I think, best is in the RFP ranking system, in which let's say it's a grading system of 1 to 10. The highest rating would be a 10 if someone says, "I'm going to preserve the church." So we do have a way of controlling the process. It's going to be the same public process. We'll be able to choose the developer, and it's going to probably end up coming to the town meeting floor, or at least to public meeting, in which people can say whether they like the proposal from a developer or private developer or not.
Okay, thank you. So, looks like the people who wanted to make the amendment, if they're not quite ready to make the amendment, are you folks ready to make the amendment or not? Because if not, we'll have another speaker come up.
You can have another speaker.
Okay, ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Maureen Byrne, 158 Westboro Road.
Yeah.
I was also part of the visioning committee, and I was surprised, all ages, and that we all pretty much agreed on the vision. What my concern is that giving this over to a few people, you kind of lose control. And people ask me at the visioning meetings, well, because I'm a big proponent of keeping the church, what would it be? Well, it could be anything. It could be a brew pub, it could be a coffee house, it could be a library. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, if a developer takes it down and builds a new building, what is that going to be? You lose control, because the developer is going to lease to whoever the developer can or will want to lease to. So we don't know that anything that would come in a new building would give us that community atmosphere that we're looking for. My concern is that at the last town meeting, it was stated by one of our selectmen that there were developers, maybe not committed to, but have expressed interest and said they would not be interested in doing this project unless Holy Angels was part of it and was torn down. So I think that a part of it is the parking. They're looking to take down the church because parking is a big issue for whatever building is going to be built. And I don't want to become another Mendon or another Hopkinton or another Westboro. I think we should I think we're great just the way we are, and if nothing happens, I'm perfectly okay with that. But I'd like, if done right and with oversight from the people of the town and not just a few, I think it could be great. But I also think it could go bad. And I also heard there might be oil contamination in the soil, which hasn't been addressed. So potentially we could have a church gone and a developer walk away because of the contamination in the soil, which hasn't been determined. So I think before we sell the church off, we better think about this for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I could just comment, it doesn't sound like people want to sell off the church. It's a question of how far do you go with it. So that's all I want to say. Right now, the amendment, as stated, can't be allowed, but maybe there's something else. I don't know.
Are we still discussing Article 34? We're not discussing the amendment?
We are not discussing the amendment because there is no amendment, right? Okay, we are.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify that we're discussing Article 34, not the amendment.
We have discussed it, the motion from Article 34, because the amendment as proposed does not fit within the four corners of the article. So therefore, we do not have an amendment at the moment. We might in a minute or two, I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay. I do have concerns about this, and I'm not opposed to selling the church, I should say that, because I do believe to move the vision forward, it has to be public-private partnerships, and that the town doesn't have, obviously, funding to make it all happen. A lot of it is going to be done privately. However, my concern right now is that we have a lot of things on the fire. We have an RFP out for the community center library, which excludes the Historical Society of the museum at this point. And I feel that the church, if that fails, And I already have a lot of concerns from what I've heard about the RFP and some of the things happening, and the property in question, and the location of it. So if it fails in November, the library, this building can offer an option. We have a plan already. I believe the original cost of that plan was $3.5 million to redo Milton Rustine Building, and I've seen the plan. It's a very good plan, and it would include the Historical Society. We might want to preserve the church, because if this doesn't pass and people don't go along with a quote blended vision of the library senior center, the church offers us an option perhaps for a community center, senior center. So I think we're just a little premature. My understanding is that we do have to work on bylaws so that we can have mixed use, and that would be one of the next steps. I feel that this, if we can't pass over it or whatever, I feel that this should be delayed until November and be concurrent with the decision about the library. So if we make a decision to fund the library, we go ahead and sell the church. If we make a decision not to, we own it. We have the option of using it. And if we decide not to, we can still sell it. And I agree with the previous speaker mentioning that putting it in the hands of the RFP committee limits the decisions to a few. So, you know, that's my feeling about this whole project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, what do you want to do?
I'd like to thank legal counsel for providing this language, and I think it is acceptable, so I would like to go ahead and add this as to the amendment.
So, there you go. Read your amendment,
Okay.
which I haven't seen, so you just have to read it, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, so it says amend as follows. Provided, however, that town meeting expresses a preference, if possible, that the exterior of the church property exterior be subject to a historic preservation restriction.
Okay.
Could you repeat that last sentence?
Yeah. Should I just read the
Just to read the motion.
Okay.
I mean, read
So
the
it's provided, however, that the town meeting expresses a preference, if possible, that the exterior church property be subject to a historic preservation restriction.
Second the motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. Let me take a look at it again. So the amendment, the last amendment was too restrictive, so this is what this one says. And this would be added to the end of the motion. Provided, however, that town meeting express a preference, if possible, that the exterior of the church property be subject to an historic preservation restriction. So my question for town council is, by saying that they express a preference to have an historic preservation restriction, that doesn't mean that it has an historic preference restriction, but that it's a preference to do that, correct?
Mr. Moderator, that's correct. It's essentially saying town meeting would prefer, it's the sense of the meeting is that it would be preferred or preferable if it could be subject to a historic preservation restriction, but it wouldn't mandate that. So there would, again, and I think it's important just to note that all of this type of a discussion would have to occur at open meetings.
Right.
So the authorization to sell is being voted on here, but the decision to actually do so, and again, the decision on the RFP and the decision as to whether that RFP is consistent with the vision would have to occur at open meetings. So there would be many other opportunities for voters and non-voters alike to attend those meetings and weigh in on that process. Also, designing the RFP the RFP would be part of that process as well, would happen in an open session.
Okay. So this is similar to the last amendment, but it is not mandated. It is a preference. That's the amendment. Has there been a second? Okay. So, not to belabor things, but what we're going to do now is discuss just the amendment here. Are you comfortable with the amendment or not? Yes or no? That's what we're going to discuss now. So who wants to speak to that? Anybody?
Bill McCormick, I'm on the Economic Development Committee. So in Article 33, the goals, the bullets that are all handed out to everyone on the way in, includes that statement, okay? That there's a strong preference to pursue. So we have already voted that here at town meeting tonight.
Well, what Article 33 voted for was a vision and a strong preference. That is correct. I guess, well, I'll use an old term. This is like a belt and the suspenders, maybe. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not. But the people who really want to try to make sure the church doesn't get taken down want to add this amendment to this motion. Okay? So that's the reason for it. Does it add any more to what we have in the motion from 33? I don't know the answer to that question, but that's what the motion is here. So any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, so again, let me read it again. Provided, however, that the town meeting express a preference, if possible, that the exterior of the church property be subject to an historic preservation restriction. Okay. We all set the vote on this now? Okay. All those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The motion is lost. The amendment is lost. So now we're going to go back to the original motion that's here. Any other discussion on it? Sir.
My name is Edward Bergman, 6 Shore Drive. The wording in the motion includes "for such sum and upon such conditions as may be determined," etc. Why could those conditions not include preservation of the building?
I don't know. Madam Town Council, do you want to address that maybe?
Mr. Moderator, it can. The board has the discretion to impose or to provide for an RFP that includes that type of a restriction, and to keep that restriction or to have it run to a nonprofit entity who's willing to enforce it.
So they can do that without the language being in there? Is what you're
Yes,
saying?
absolutely.
Okay. So that's they have the authority to do what you would ask.
So if people are in favor of the church being preserved, I would encourage them to speak to the selectmen to that point, because apparently they have the authority to do that.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Mr. Andrews.
I think we've had a great discussion.
Really? Yeah, we have. I know sometimes when Mr. Andrews gets up, we all kind of talk, though it has been a good discussion. It really has, folks. And it's been long discussion, but it's important discussion because the center of town, the future, you're deciding, and to some extent, what the center of the town will look like in the future. So, where are we? Here's the motion that we have. Okay, it's talking about Board of Selectmen having the authority to sell the church and to sell the parking lot with certain restrictions to it, whatever, RFPs, so on and so forth. That's what we're voting on right now. If you're in favor of this, you vote yes. If you're opposed, you vote no. It only requires a majority vote. So, all those in favor of the motion derived from Article 34, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The motion carries by a majority. Article 35, Board of Selectmen. 35.
I make a motion to pass over Article 35.
Okay, second? Moved and seconded to pass over Article 35. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. No, by a majority, I'm sorry. By a majority. There were some no's out there. Article 36. Go ahead.
Hi, Michelle Israeli, 128 South Street. Make a motion that the town of Upton buy down the tax rate by $250,000 from free cash, stabilization, or any other reserve funds via appropriation.
Okay, is there a second?
Mr. Moderator.
Yeah. Could you give me the wording, please? Town council has an opinion on this. Yes.
Mr. Moderator?
Yep.
The motion has to include a particular funding source with a particular amount of money.
Okay.
So if you just say $250,000 from 3 different sources, that's not affected to appropriate any money for that purpose.
Okay, so it has to be one specific place, you're saying?
It could come from 2 places, but we need to know exactly how much from each place.
Ah, gotcha. So therefore, we just can't say 250 from 3 different places. We have to have like 100 from here, 100 from here, 50 from there. Okay? So that's what has to happen.
Do I need to amend the motion, or do I?
Well, let me say this. Right now, there is no motion because we can't even accept it as it is. So what you need to do is come up with a new motion.
Okay, so here's the motion.
Okay?
I make a motion that the town of Upton buy down the tax rate by $250,000 from free cash collected previously via appropriation.
Okay. So the motion is to buy down the tax rate by $250,000. Is there a second? Second? I know, believe me, I'll get the FinCom. FinCom recommendation?
Unfavorable, Mr. Moderator.
FinCom recommends unfavorable action. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes. Michelle Antonelli, still from 148
Yep.
South Street. I have a brief presentation.
Please.
Longer, but sorry.
Wait for the presentation to start, I guess?
Yeah. You know what, I can see why they work on this. Okay, simply put, we have reserve fund, we have,
Folks, charter must stop. Speaker has the floor. Go ahead, Mom.
simply put, we have stabilization funds, a March balance of $1.72 million, free cash, as everything was expended, I believe that was validated at $779,766,000. We have a capital stabilization budget, capital stabilization fund balance from March of $195,000. Next slide, please. Just to review what happened last year, the tax rate increased by 8 cents per thousand. Assessments also increased on some property, $25 million increase in assessed values. More money was collected than needed. Our 2019 tax increases. I don't know about most of you, but I'm thinking I might be living in a tent soon. So, next slide, please. We also have, in addition, an overlay surplus, which is for tax abatements when you have, when you ask for tax abatements on your property, and they have to, or they decide that yes, they miscalculated the amount that you should pay. We also have retained earnings, which are enterprise accounts. They maintain their own reserves. FinCom has a reserve that was appropriated tonight of $25,000. So free cash is partially a surplus of what was collected versus what was actually needed for the last year. So how many umbrellas do we need, folks? This surplus, particularly when it is moved into stabilization, may not be used in your lifetime or your residence in this town. So my suggestion, again, next slide, is let's minimize taxes to support our current 55 and older majority demographic, attract young families and businesses, and avoid pre-taxing residents. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Just one minor change in the wording. Instead of using the phrase "buy down the tax rate," it's more appropriate to say reduce the tax levy. You follow me?
I'm fine.
Fine, thank you. So there's no need to really vote on that. That's just for fiscal year 20 tax levy. So the motion will be, I make a motion that the town of Upton reduce the fiscal year 2020 tax levy by $250,000. So we're still safe from free cash? From free cash, yes, okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. Speaker, go ahead.
First of all, I'd just like to say it's refreshing to see somebody in the room that's interested in reducing our taxes. Second of all, I'd like to ask if we were to use that $250,000 to offset, right now you're looking at an increase of 2.5%. What would that bring the new increase to? How much would it reduce the 2.5%?
Does everybody understand the question?
Okay, so you said that we had 2.5% increase in taxes coming. If we used that 250,000 to reduce the 2.5%, how much of a reduction would that be? Would it be 1%, 2%?
As a member of the Board of Assessors, because we don't know what the values of the land are, we don't know what that the percentages are very difficult to calculate because we don't know what the values of the properties are in town.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Flaherty, do you...
Moderator, through you, might I ask the accountant to opine on this article?
Okay. So, town accountant, any comments about taking the 250, reducing the fiscal 2020 budget?
But I think the question that she asked actually was, when we raise 2.5 each year, approximately how much does that add to our tax levy?
Okay, yeah, good.
So the question for the 2.5 automatic increase, so fiscal year, just to give you a comparison, so fiscal year 2019 was 467,344. In fiscal year 2020, we're estimating it's going to be 487,461. This is an automatic increase. This is something that in the tax recap, it's an automatic. It's not something. It's a pre-populated amount. It's not something that we could just remove or delete.
So that's a 2.5%.
That's automatic. That's the whole Prop 2.5. This is something I've heard in prior meetings where there's a primer 2.5. So if anybody's interested in reading Prop 2.5, there is a primer on the Massachusetts DOR website that speaks to it. It's approximately about a 30-page document that they can read.
Thank you. I don't know if that answers your question, but they've tried to answer the question. Anyone else? FinCom. Do you have a comment to make about that, or? Is that the one, FinCom reserve 25,000, is that the one you're looking at?
Yep.
Okay, so do you have a comment?
The FinCom reserve account is there to cover sudden and extraordinary, out of the ordinary expenses during the year. If the water heater at the police station blows up and they don't have enough funds in their maintenance account, they come to the Finance Committee reserve. The Finance Committee controls that account, and if they deem it necessary, they transfer that money to take care of the water heater expense. The overlay surplus is money that you can't touch unless it's released by the assessors. Retained earnings in the enterprise accounts, they're there for water and sewer purposes only. The free cash is money that's there as the accountant alluded to earlier, increased receipts, money that isn't spent. I'll give you an example. We went into this meeting tonight with, what, $1 million in free cash? And how much did we spend, Mr. Accountant? Could you help me out with that?
Yep, we spent 478.9, 592, 799, 761.
If it weren't for free cash, some of the things that were funded through the free cash, you wouldn't have, because they would not come in under the levy limit. You would not be able to fund them under the levy limit. With respect to stabilization money, the State Department of Local Services, Department of Revenue recommends that you have about 10% of your budget as stabilization. In that case, if we have a $24 million budget, we should probably have $2.4, $2.3 million in stabilization. This is there to cover expenses can be used for capital going forward. Originally, stabilization could only be used for capital. But about 10 years ago, the rules were relaxed so that you can use stabilization money for any purpose for which money can lawfully be appropriated. I don't know what really, the Finance Committee is against taking this money and applying it to free cash. You're going to lose in the end.
Mr. Moderator, I just wanted to add, so just to remind everybody, so free cash, it's one-time money. And we're asking to fund free cash for operating expenses. So these expenses, they're not one-time. These are operating, so these will be there next year. So already next year, then you'll be looking for another $250. And there's a snowball effect to this. And I've seen some communities who have done this through a financial crisis, thinking it's just temporary, and then it becomes permanent. So I just want to keep that in mind. It's not a good use to use one-time money for operating expenses. So it's essentially, it's like using your savings account to run your household or to pay, your real estate taxes. So eventually it's going to run out. And there's going to be a problem. It's going to be an issue. So I just wanted to let everybody know it's not generally the best use of free cash.
Thank you. Sir?
Matt Mead, 49 South Street. So between the two of them, they may have kind of answered, but just to clarify, so kind of more to Finance Committee, is it where the $250,000 is being requested from that you object to, or is it that you give unfavorable action to, or is it the $250,000? Am I asking that right? If she asked for it from a different account, or a little bit from each account, would that change your?
No, that would not change our.
Okay.
I just also want to add, so free cash, stabilization, the capital, it's all one-time money. Essentially, it's like a savings account. So it's one-time money. And the budget, which is the general fund, which you're funding, public safety, DPW, those are recurring costs. Those aren't one-time expenses. So, in my opinion, it's not a good match. Another thing I just wanted to add too is the bond rating agencies. So when we talk to the bond rating agencies, this is not something favorable for them as well. So the debt service that you see for the interest, we have very favorable rates. And that's not something that they like to hear, that we're using one-time money for operating expenses. So if we want to keep enjoying the favorable interest rates, that's another thing also to think about too. We do have to have, they do look at our reserves and to look at appropriate reserves. So for example, the general stabilization account, which is essentially like a rainy day fund, we have 1.7 in that account. That accounts for about 7.2%. As the FinCom chair alluded to, they're looking for 10%. So we're not quite there yet.
Okay, no, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Board, I don't know if you had anything else to say about it? No? Okay, sir? Go ahead.
All right, Ralph Whitney, 11 Halford Ave. Basically, what I think is a lot of what they vote through here, they seem to be getting extra free money that goes into the free money fund. You know, a lot of the things. I mean, I've seen things that I've asked people, said, hey, you know, like one example is the roof on the fire station. Now, granted, they need a new roof, all right? I walked up to people and I said, how much do you think it costs to put a shingled roof on a fire station that's like 10 or 15 years old? They said $50,000. I said, keep going. 100,000, 150. They couldn't believe that it was $200,000. That, you know, and so now it's not like these people are getting an invoice saying, okay, you got your material cost, you got your labor cost, and this is what it actually costs. All right, so then all that, now, right after that, they had a $40,000 thing that they voted on. All right, say that roof only cost $140,000. All right, now that's $60,000 less than what they had. That money could have went to the next amendment. Instead, they voted through $240,000 worth of things. And it's not like you're getting an itemized bill on this. You're just throwing out a number, and then the rest of the money goes into a free fund, and they don't want to use it. So it's like I think they're continually adding to this free fund, you know, but they don't want to touch the money. And I mean, I don't know, like the lady said, you know, pretty soon we're going to be living in Turkey. You know, the tax bracket in this town is.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Andrews?
Under the subtitle Old Dog New Trick, I'd like to make a motion that we table this article.
On the table. Okay. So, is there a second to table it?
Second.
Okay, so again, to table something requires a 2/3 majority vote, and there's no discussion about it. If it doesn't get tabled, then we come back and we keep talking about it. So, so the motion is to table the motion from Article 36, which is the reducing the fiscal year 2020 tax levy by $250,000. So, if you, I want to make sure I get this right. If you don't want to do the reducing of the 2020 tax levy, you will vote yes to table this. Okay? Not, you'll vote no. Do you understand that?
What was that one more time, please?
Right. If you vote, the motion right now by Mr. Andrews is to table this motion. Tabling it means that you don't want to vote for the reducing the 2020 tax levy by $250,000 from free cash. So if you vote yes to this motion that Mr. Andrews just made, okay, that means you're against the original motion that was made by Ms. Antonelli. You follow me? I'm sorry. I didn't mean.
Mr. Moderator, it's yes to stop talking, no to keep talking.
Well, it does more than that because it's to table it. It's to kill it.
To stop talking permanently.
Right. It's to stop talking about it permanently and to kill it.
Yep.
Right. That's what it means. So that's why it's different than just moving the question. Okay. It's different than to move the question. This is killing it. So if you vote yes right now, it means you're killing the motion that was made by Ms. Antonelli. Right? That's what it means.
Yes.
You got that now? Okay. Sorry. 10:33. Okay, good. So, all those in favor of the motion to table Article 36 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The motion carries by a 2/3 majority vote. 37. Ms. Antonelli.
Still Michelle Antonelli, 141 South Street. Brief presentation on the next one.
I can't hear you.
A brief presentation on the next motion. Still Michelle Antonelli of 148 South Street. I move where a change in appointing and supervising authority of the town personnel would require special legislation to refer the issue to the Board of Selectmen for further study and request that the board prepare a warrant article in special legislation for inclusion on the warrant for the 2019 fall town meeting or any special meeting it may choose to call prior thereto. So the citizens petition Article 37 asks the town to consider enacting a reporting structure that is uniform for all unelected employees, that gives authority to the Board of Selectmen or its agent with respect to personnel issues, hiring, firing, and reviews, supervision of the workday, working conditions, supervision, allocation, content of work responsibilities.
Okay.
The purpose of this request is that the town, through its town manager, has all of the responsibility, including financial, housing, liability, and conduct, with no regulatory authority over employees and department heads that report to independent commissions and boards. Next slide, please. The departments that do report to the BOS are the police, fire, DPW, building code and enforcement, town accountant. I wrote this, I can't even see it.
Elder services.
Elder services, town clerk, conservation, and zoning. Next slide, please. The independent commissions with employees that do not report are the Board of Assessors, the Board of Health, Library Trustees, Planning Board, Recreation Commission, and the Treasurer Collector offices. Next slide. So personnel bylaws sets regulations of most employees by the town manager. This is in our personnel bylaw that was adopted in November 2018. All town departments, employees, and positions shall be subject to the provisions of this bylaw except employees with personal contracts, and it goes forward. With respect to the town manager's role as defined in the Chapter 391 of the Act of 2008. Next slide, please. So the town manager role in that Chapter 391 Acts of 2008 excludes employees not under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. Under Section 4, shall be responsible and accountable to the board for the efficient and orderly conduct of the departments and functions placed in its charge. A, be the hiring authority for all employees under the jurisdiction of the board specifically. Next slide. Oh, undo that one. So this is apparently a hot mess because having this change made so that all employees in the town of Upton report through the town manager and to the Board of Selectmen requires special legislation. So thus, this is not the actual motion, I've had the original motion.
So could you just read the original motion again so that we can get a second on it?
So I move where a change in appointing and supervisory authority of the town personnel would require special legislation to refer this issue to the Board of Selectmen for further study and request that the board prepare a warrant article and special legislation for inclusion on the warrant for the 2019 fall town meeting or any special meeting it may call prior thereto.
Is there a second motion? It's been seconded. Moved and seconded. So essentially, this motion is to do what it is that you just explained for the last 5 minutes or so, right? Very good. Thank you. Right. It would, town council, could you state?
So it refers the issue to the Board of Selectmen for further study and request to prepare a warrant.
Correct. Yeah, but it just do this. Got it. Okay. I'll give it back to you. Okay. Town council?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, so because this proposal would require special legislation to change the special act that was already referred to and to either add to that or create a new special act, and the article didn't say anything about that, this motion refers the concept to the Board of Selectmen to have them further study it, which would involve, obviously the presentation gives some good feedback as to what the petitioner is looking for, and then to prepare a warrant article and special legislation for those purposes for either a meeting between now and then or a meeting in the fall meeting.
Okay.
And so it's essentially, it's more than a sense of the meeting, it's a particular request to study and bring it back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion? Any Mr. Andrews, you're by the microphone, so,
I'd like to make a motion that we table this article.
Second.
okay, which would mean no discussion, but, so tabling it, if 2/3 of you don't want to do it, you vote yes. If not, then you vote no. So there will be no discussion on it. All those in favor of tabling the motion from Article 37, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. 2/3 majority vote. Okay, so we need to get this back. Okay. We've got 38, right?
Goodness, 3 strikes, I'm out here, folks. Michelle Antonelli, 148 South Street.
Mr. Moderator, point of order.
Yes.
Which did we vote? We voted not to table.
You did vote to table it.
Oh, we voted to.
This is the next one.
Yeah, you voted to table it, we moved on to 38 now.
Okay.
Yes. It's all right. We don't normally do that, so it is a little bit confusing. We don't normally table things, but it's in the laws.
Okay, so this article is about restructuring our Recreation Commission. I move with the proposed changes to the composition of the Recreation Commission affect the term of current elected officials and where special legislation may be needed to accomplish the goals of this article, to refer the issue to the Board of Selectmen for further study, and request that the Board prepare a warrant article, bylaw amendment, and/or special legislation as may be needed for inclusion of an article for such purposes on the warrant for the 2019 Fall Town Meeting, or any special meeting it may choose to call thereto. So
have you made the motion yet?
That's the motion.
That's the motion, okay, good.
Can we look at the motion?
I will, yeah, so there's been a second, so let me take a look at the motion. Okay, thank you. So, move to the proposed changes to the composition of the Recreation Commission affect terms of current elected officials and where special legislation may be needed to accomplish the goals of this article, to refer the issue to the Board of Selectmen for further study and request the Board prepare a warrant article, bylaw amendment, and/or special legislation as may be needed for inclusion of an article for such purposes on the warrant 2009. So in a way, so it's a similar motion as the previous one with respect to structure, but for a different reason.
Correct.
Right, okay, good. So, it's been moved and seconded. Town Council, any further comment, or is it the same kind of comment you made the last one?
It's the same.
Okay, thank you very much. So, go ahead.
So thank you. The
Yep.
Recreation Commission faces unique challenges that none of the other commissions or committees here in town face. First of all, they're dealing with our most vulnerable citizens. They're dealing with our children, as well as the whole range of citizenry. But primarily, we look at the programs that they run, and they address children's needs. They have the most diverse needs. Our children are changing, they're different, they're unique, and as we're discovering that their needs are far greater than I think we used to think many years ago. The Recreation Commission has the largest range of responsibilities. They have to maintain facilities inside and out. They have to think about universal design and learning, universal design and leisure. They have to think about accessibility in natural settings. That's really difficult, folks. They have to think about accessibility in the built world, and they were handed a difficult task with that. They have to deal with the safety of children and staff in an uncontrolled environment. They have to deal with mostly young, inexperienced staff. And they have to, unlike most of the other commissions in town, have to budget for breaking even. You've heard the pressure on them tonight. Next slide, please. So the demands on this commission are asking them to be experts across many
I'd like to ask the Board of Selectmen to quiet down, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
The demands on the commission are very diverse and they're very extreme. They have to be experts, or they're expected to be experts in personnel and supporting young employees, which is very different than what many of our personnel experts are. They have to be experts or have great knowledge about the ADA for existing building and natural settings. They have to think about and prepare for universal design for learning and leisure activities. They have to have expertise in social and emotional growth and child development. They have to have facilities experience and knowledge about care, maintenance, and remediation. They have to have facilities planning with the expansions that are going to be coming our way with recreation. They have to be prepared for expansion. They have to be, again, budgeting for profitability. They have to be experts or have some experience in marketing. They have to have some knowledge in health and medical as we think about things like measles outbreaks and are our kids inoculated. So there's a lot of liability here. This commission needs our support. The demands on RecCom are high stakes, they're diverse, they're evolving, and they're a little unrealistic. This is a 3-member board. They need more support on the volunteer, the board level, and they need more support on the administrative level. So, next slide. This proposal is, no, that's not this one. So this proposal is actually, you can take the motion back. This proposal is actually looking to find the way to best support this board. They've done a lot of work. They have a lot more ahead of them. And as you can see, the demands and the expectations that we have for RecCom are grossly unfair. There's 3 people there. We need more people to volunteer. We need more people to support it. And we need to support it at the town level as well.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion from Article 38, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The motion is lost. Mr. Robertson.
I'm here again.
Good.
I make a motion to dissolve the warrant and adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, folks.